Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi, Senior News Editor with Retail Insider, and joining me today is Lisa Amlani, who is Principal and Founder of the Retail Strategy Group, as well as co-founder of The Merchant Life. Thanks for joining us today, Lisa.
Happy to be here,
I wanted,
always.
yeah, thank you very much. And I wanted to talk to you about pop-ups. And, it's the holiday season coming upon us very shortly. It's not already for, a lot of times during the holiday season, we see the rise of pop-ups. Tell me a little bit about what you're seeing in the last couple of years in terms of trends and why we see such a rise in pop-up locations for retailers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love this question because I think that with COVID and the pandemic, what we've seen is the rise of pop-ups and short-term leases to help serve brands better. And I think that, these big shopping centers are now embracing pop-ups. And of course, the department stores we know have always embraced the pop-ups, even, back in the day from like a trunk show. If you're old school like me, you'll remember those. But I would say that pop-ups are actually more important than ever. And we've kind of seen a rise in them, especially the last, I would say, even few months, because I think there was a drop off at the beginning of the year where, we felt, okay, maybe they're not as relevant as they used to be. But
Mhm.
I think what we're seeing now is the engagement of the TikTok influencer. We're seeing a lot happening with Shein, and their pop-up stores and trying to infiltrate bricks and mortar. And we're also seeing a lot of pop-ups in the last month with New York Fashion Week, for example. So I would say that pop-ups are definitely relevant, but I think they've been redefined um, on getting closer to the customer, while also engaging with the data that comes with those pop-ups to inform either product decisions, promotion decisions, and of course, location decisions.
Now, speaking of locations, you mentioned malls, which is the kind of the place that most people think of pop-ups. But where are they also appearing? Where can they appear?
Well, I mean, I was in London, in the UK a few weeks ago, and Box Park is still very popular. I used to actually live in Shoreditch in 2014, and Box Park and the container model is still very relevant and in fact growing. So we've seen that even in Toronto with Stacked Market, and so that's actually a dedicated pop-up space where brands can rent the space for a short period of time. We're also seeing still the popular souk out of the UK kind of moving, I think, inching their way towards the US and hopefully Canada. I think it's a great model because it's digitally supported for a brand. And, I think that the pop-ups are relevant because it really does connect you with the customer in a way that maybe you'd lost that relationship with them. DTC brands, for example, the digitally native ones. I mean, look at Allbirds and their pop-ups in Nordstrom. I think that's, a great way to test the market and understand where customers want to shop that brand.
Hmm. Now, I'm looking at different locations, and when we think of pop-ups, we think of those little kiosks in the middle of a mall, right? And
Right.
but you mentioned obviously the pop-ups in retail stores and department
Yeah.
stores. There's also say empty spaces in a mall, right? That can be
Yeah.
done on a short-term basis. Street fronts as well, right? So there really is endless possibilities, right, for them?
Yeah, I would say that absolutely. And I think it really depends on what community these brands are looking to get closer to and where their customer is now shopping and where they've evolved. So, of course, we know that the pandemic really shifted communities into the suburbs versus, the downtown core, but that's actually changing now. So you're seeing a lot more pop-ups within the city center. You're also seeing them with, communities like in Muskoka, in Collingwood, or in the US, you're seeing it in the Hamptons. So it really depends on where the communities are, where they're spending most of their time, and how that hybrid working model has really changed the way the consumer shops and when.
Now, in terms of the types of pop-ups that are out there, in my mind, I always associated with, cell phones, right? And because you see them all over the place. But can you talk a little bit about the range of industries within the retail sectors that adopt pop-up models?
Oh, absolutely. I think, resale is a great example. There's a lot of vintage shop pop-ups. Sorry, I'll start that one again. There's a lot of vintage pop-ups that are coming up in the UK right now. I was just reading one about a TikTok influencer, and the lineups are around the corner. That's one example. The other example is, what we're seeing, this weekend was very prominent, that the Halloween pop-ups are back, and so are the Christmas ones. So I think that that's still a market that needs to be served, which is great, because it's a very limited assortment that lasts a very short period of time. But then what we're also seeing is the rise of that digitally native brand coming into that bricks and mortar space. There's a lot of opportunity, I would say, for brands, and one example, which I was looking at this weekend, was Canada Goose partnered with Annie Leibovitz on their latest campaign. What I would love to see as a lover of art and fashion and photography is take their Eaton Center store and put a pop-up in there of the beautiful art and photography that would engage the customer in a new way. So I think it's also about connecting with the consumer through experiences, because this is something that you'll even see as you walk into a Shein pop-up, where it's totally Instagrammable. So I think it is about connecting with the consumer, who they are, where and how they want to shop, but also how they want to connect with the brand.
And what about the length of time that some of these pop-ups take? Can you, in your experience and from what you've seen, what's kind of the shortest to the longest you've seen a quote unquote pop-up take place?
Oh, I have seen, a pop-up last for a few hours. And, we used to see that with Supreme back in the day. And, I'm sure you probably reported on the BTS pop-up that, ran out of stock, within an hour.
Yeah.
So I think it really depends on, if it's tied to an event, like a promotional activity, like for Halloween, or if it's tied to an actual event, like a concert. It really depends. I think, it depends on the brand, it depends on the product assortment, and it depends on, how the customer will engage with that brand.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned a concert, right? Because that's another area that you
Yeah.
don't think of concerts and folk festivals and any festivals like that you see all these little brands showing up, right? And that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, merch at a concert is a hot commodity, right? And that's really what a pop-up, I think it actually it infuses that exclusive energy almost, where if you don't buy it now, you're never going to be able to get it. So I think that's also part of how the customer will engage with the brand.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I love about the pop-up is what kind of data you can capture from the pop-up about your customer, and how that could inform product decisions, location decisions, and of course decisions around the experience that the customer is attracted to.
Can you talk a little bit about Lisa, the permanence of on how many of these pop-ups use it as an idea to maybe test whether or not they're going to go permanent and have a permanent location?
Yeah, I think the Allbirds example is a great one as they start to venture into the wholesale model. We know that they were already partnering with Nordstrom, but this is a great example where, they're going to try it out in a few stores. I think it's about 100 stores, and see where their customer is attracted to their brand, if they're coming into Nordstrom looking for Allbirds. So I think that's when you start to understand, okay, how can this wholesale partnership develop into something more long term? So instead of it being a pop-up or a shop in shop, or even we've seen a lot of license models like the ones in Holt Renfrew or even Harrods, for example. It's a way for the department store merchant to see if that product will resonate with their customer for a long period of time, and how do they bring that into their long-standing assortment. So it's a good way to test, right? The other thing I was actually going to look at, hopefully in a few weeks, is the pop-up of the vending machines in Bergdorf's. Now they're luxury, but it's very interesting to see how something luxury and accessibility will be able to attract a different kind of consumer. The luxury model is very interesting because it's not only attracting that luxury consumer and the aspirational consumer, but also that younger consumer who possibly will only buy from resale. So maybe the vending machine is an interesting idea to attract a new customer that is looking to engage with the brand in a new way.
Yeah. All right. Super. Thanks, Lisa, for joining us today.
Of course, my pleasure. Always happy to talk to you guys.
All right, super. That was Lisa Amlani, who is principal and founder of the Retail Strategy Group, as well as the co-founder of The Merchant Life. I'm Mario Toneguzzi, senior news editor with Retail Insider. Thanks for joining us today.